Like I said, this session will be recorded. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Brandon Ford. I am the Assistant Township Manager here in Lower Merion Township. I am joined with Ernest Pendleton, who is the Assistant Director for Building, as well as our two housing officers, Steve and Claire. Today, we are going to do a quick presentation about the new rules and regulations that have been recently adopted regarding rental licensing here in the township. And once we go through all the presentation, then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. You will note that you do not currently have the ability to unmute or turn your camera on. So once we get to that question and answer portion after the presentation, we ask anyone who has a question to raise their hand, their virtual hand, and we'll go over how to do that at that time. But in order to do that, it'll be in the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. All right. And I'll also unlock the chat so that if you are unable to unmute, you'll be able to type your question into the chat box. All right. So with that, let's get started. Just a quick overview of the time frame of this new ordinance. We started drafting this earlier this year. The new rental ordinance was posted in its entirety over this past summer, July 31st. It was posted online. It was also advertised in the newspaper in September, and it was adopted by the Board of Commissioners just last month on October 16th. We are now here on the info session, November 21st, and all the new rental licensing goes into effect starting January 1st, 2025. So at the start of the new year, we will be implementing these new regulations from the licensing standpoint. The entirety of the new ordinance can be found at that link below. And, towards the tail end, we will copy and paste that link into the chat so that you all will have the ability to go directly to that portion of the township website and view the rental ordinance in its entirety. Why did we come up with the new ordinance? We can basically sum it up to three different motivations. One, we wanted to expand our regulations to differentiate between student and non-student / residential rentals. We also wanted to clarify expectations. We acknowledge that the previous set of rules and regulations pertaining to rental licensing weren't exactly clear, and there was a lot of ambiguity. So we wanted to clarify those expectations so that not only did property owners who have rentals understand what is expected of them, but also what is expected of the township, right? And we also wanted to strengthen the ability of the township to enforce our code regulating these rental licensing and the rental units. When we're talking about key provisions, right? Currently, previously, the rental regulations were codified under Chapter 92 of the Township's Code. All the new rental regulations will now be found in Chapter 75 of the Township Code, which will be strictly for housing rules and regulations. And we also have a fair housing chapter that's in there that pre-exists our efforts here in Chapter 75. Another distinguishing feature of the new regulations is that it separates student rentals and non-student / residential rentals, right? Previously, it was all somewhat the same license. Now there are two separate licenses and two separate sets of criteria. One set for student rentals and one for non-student and residential rentals, which can be found in Article 2 and Article 3 of Chapter 75 in that link that will be posted in the chat later on. There's also an amendment to the fee schedule that will detail towards the end of this presentation. but the fees have been adjusted for, again, for both the student rental units as well as the non-student rental units. A couple more details. Uh, Unlike the previous rules and regulations, where let's say for a multi-unit building, each multi-unit building was issued in like one license. Now a license will be issued for each and every single unit. So for example, if you have a building that has 6 units, uh, that building will have 6 separate licenses for each of those rental units. Now, I want to be clear that, we're not expecting 6 separate applications, right? You can still submit one application for that building, but at the tail end for the township, we will be issuing 6 separate licenses, one for each unit. And we do that, one, to clarify the rules and responsibilities for each of those individual units, but also that if we have a case where an individual unit may not be uh, adhering to the rules and regulations, the township would then be able to act on an individual unit without impacting the other units in that structure. Whereas the previous code, because there was only one license for a multi-unit building, we'd have to act on that singular license and impact everyone living in that structure. So we wanted to fine tune that a little bit, and we felt that issuing individual licenses, although it may be more work on our end, uh, would allow us to, really fine tune and narrow in to address individual problematic units without impacting the other units in a structure. Another key provision is that the annual licensing period will now be set January 1st to December 31st. And that is regardless of what type of rental you have. Every license that will be issued by the township will be good for that set period of time, right? And we wanted to align it with the calendar year, one, just to simplify the process and simplify the expectation that every year you're expected to have a new license, and that by the start of every new year, you should have all your renewals in place that before the new year starts, right? A third key provision that has been added is that the owner of the rental property or a property manager must live within 10 miles of the township. And this provision is new. So if you are an owner that live in the township, you're good. If you're an owner that lives within 10 miles, you're also good. But if you are an owner who lives outside of that 10-mile radius, or you have a property manager that is outside that 10-mile radius, this new regulation requires that you have someone within 10 miles that is responsible for that property. And that provision was based on the premise that, should anything happen at an individual property for a rental unit, we need to have assurances that we are able to contact and interact with someone, and someone will be at that property in a timely manner should anything happen. The fourth bullet talks about disruptive conduct. Now, this will describe what that means, but that is a provision that is exclusive for student rentals. So that provision will only impact those of you who have student rental units, right? And again, talking about clarification and, clarifying expectations. That last one, we outline what the enforcement is, as well as the appeal process, right? So it outlines exactly, if you disagree with a ruling that the township issues, what you need to do in order to appeal that decision. And here are the enforcement actions, right? So, the first step is a formal warning, right? You will get a letter from us, identifying what the issue is and giving you a set period of time to rectify it, right? We always want to give someone an opportunity to correct any issues that arise. But should a warning be issued and the issue not be addressed, right? There are three separate enforcement actions that the township will now have in its tool belt that it can utilize. One is a suspension, where you immediately lose your license for a set period of time, providing that you correct the issue at hand. We also would have the ability to not renew your license for a set period of time. And the most serious, of course, is revocation, where you not only lose your license, but you also lose the ability to renew your license for a set period of time, right? None of these will exist in perpetuity. They will always have a sunset or a time frame associated with them that is reflective of the issue or the collection of issues at hand. Talking a little bit more about student rentals, right? Again, one of the key provisions of the new law is to differentiate student rentals from non-student rentals, right? And we added a definition of what we consider a student. And essentially, any individual who is not related to the homeowner, who is enrolled and matriculating in an undergraduate or a graduate program at a college and university, right? Now, the exception for that are graduate students who work or who attend part-time. So that is only full-time graduate students, but it encompasses all undergraduates who are currently attending a institute of higher learning. The regulations do not apply to on-campus dorms or housing. So those who have units that are owned by let's say Rosemont or Villanova or one of the other institutions, these regulations do not apply to those. These regulations are only for those rental units that are privately owned and acquire a license from the township. Another key provision for the student rentals, again, only for the student rentals, is an affidavit identifying each tenant of a student rental is now required. And the owners will be required to keep that affidavit updated. So, for example, when everyone puts in for their new license come for the new year, that license applications needs to be accompanied by an affidavit strictly identifying each individual who lives in a given unit, right? So you'll have an affidavit for each unit in which you would like a license for. And that is not only allowable and upheld by court, but it also helps the township prevent overcrowding and ensure the safety of these rental units. And again, we talk about disruptive conduct, which is again exclusively for student rentals. And this is the definition of disruptive conduct, right? So it's anything, any conduct, action that is loud, untimely, offensive, or otherwise disturbs the reasonable sensibility and peaceful enjoyment of the premises, the quality of life in the neighborhood, right? And that will be determined by either the officer that is responding to a call or our code enforcement officers who are responding to a complaint, right? And while this disruptive conduct may not elevate to the level of a criminal filing, it is something that impacts the community, and it is something that the township will now consider when we are licensing individual units. And lastly, we're going to talk about the rental license fees. As we mentioned earlier, the fees have been changed. So we did change it a little bit. The dwelling student rental licenses for dwellings of up to 2 units go from 135 to 175. Each additional student unit over 2 units goes from 25 per unit to 90 per unit. And again, these changes, the last time these fees were adjusted were back in 2011. So it has been over 10 years, about a decade since these fees were adjusted. And these new fees reflect what it actually costs for the township to inspect, regulate, and maintain the licensing program here in the township. This is not, something because we wanted to generate revenue or anything like that. This is the actual cost that it takes for the township to run the licensing program. And you will note that there are different prices between the student rentals and the residential rentals, with the student rentals being a little bit more expensive per unit because of the additional paperwork, because of the resident affidavit, right? And because it requires a little bit more work, there's a little bit more of a cost associated with that. So with that, those are the key provisions of the new rental ordinance that we wanted to review and we wanted to have a conversation with. We do have township staff available to answer questions should you have any. And with that, Ernest, do you have anything to add?
Not at this time.
All right. All right. And with that, again, I will remind everyone that this session is being recorded. So this will be placed on the township website and YouTube page for future recording. And you will be able to visit the presentation, as well as the presentation will be made available on the township website as well. So with that, we will open up to questions. So if you do have a question, we do ask that you raise your virtual hand and I will unmute you. In order to raise your virtual hand, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a react button. Click on that and click on the raise hand button. All right. Courtney.
Hey, thanks for allowing us to ask questions. I have an odd one. So the provision on owner/property manager must live within 10 miles. So how does it work if the owner typically does reside at the property and typically does live there, but is temporarily away further than 10 miles away?
I guess I would ask you to define temporarily, right? Like if it's a vacation, like Ernest, correct me if I'm wrong, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
But essentially that provision is, we wanted to ensure that if you are a property owner who owns a rental, that you're not living in Colorado or, let's say New Jersey or New York and not have someone on hand that
Got it.
interact
Okay.
with, right? So I guess, what do you mean by temporarily? Are we talking like a week or are we talking a couple months?
Um, it could vary, I guess. They essentially my clients, they like come and go. So yeah, I guess I would need to solidify exactly. Yeah, I would need to solidify from them when they plan on being away. But vacations, yes.
Yeah, the vacations, I wouldn't worry about that, that
Okay.
kind of stuff.
Cool.
We just want to have someone who we can regularly have contact with. And
Got it.
all right,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. All right, thank you, Courtney. Great question. Bear with me. All right, I will try and get you in the order in which you raise your hand. Lisa.
Hi there.
Hi,
Thanks.
Lisa.
So I kind of in keeping with what Courtney just asked, what classifies a property manager? Can an owner just appoint an individual, or does it need to be someone that is licensed as a property manager?
Ernest, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. No, on your application, there is a spot where you can appoint someone, even a tenant, as long as they sign off and they're in agreement that that's going to be their responsibility. In which case, if there's a violation or, some of our landlords split their time between here and Florida, it gives us someone to send information to or contact in case of an emergency.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And just a reminder, our code enforcement, they're a great group. And if you have any questions, as you're getting ready to put your application in, we encourage you to give us a call, stop on by, and ask those questions, right? Franklin.
There we go.
Yep.
Hopefully you
you're
can hear
good.
me.
Yep.
All right. The 10 miles, I'm really a little confused by the 10 miles. I mean, I understand the concept behind it, but if you're trying to avoid somebody living in Florida, Colorado, whatever, to manage the unit without having somebody on site, that makes sense. 10 miles seems really short. How did that number come about? If somebody is 15 miles away, or I mean, the reality is even an hour away seems reasonable, but even 15 miles is within a half hour. So how did 10 miles come about?
So 10 miles was an average of other municipalities that have similar provisions in their code. So that was the average of a collection of municipalities that have this provision in their code. So that's how we kind of got to 10 miles. All right. Andrea. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Brandon. I'm asking a question about the disruptive behavior for non-students. How would that be handled?
Disruptive behavior does not
Apply to
apply to non-students.
non-student.
That is only strictly for student rentals.
Okay. Thank you.
Easy one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great question.
Mhm.
You and Temple. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
All right, so with the first two questions, neither the owner nor the property manager are individuals, they are entities. The property manager does employ staff to work at the property. They are not required to work on the property. Neither the property manager nor the owner live in the state of, or operate out of the state of Pennsylvania. Their domestic is Virginia. So in this situation, I'm assuming that we can appoint the community manager that is employed by the property manager to be the point of contact, but we do not require them to live on property. So any issues with that? And is it something that can be changed every day or every year when we renew?
Brandon, I'll take that one.
Yep.
That's fine. However, our codes do require a maintenance person or a property manager to live on the property if you have more than 45 units. If you're under 45 units, that's not a requirement.
Okay, I guess we'll have to figure that out.
All right. Thank you, Temple. Shelly, you're up next.
Hi, my question is about student versus non-student. So for example, if I have a building with 75 units, do I need to split out for the license renewal? Let's say 7 are occupied by students. Do I need to split that out?
Yes.
That depends on how many students are in each unit. So you have 75 units and you have 7 students living in them. Are they living in a unit by themselves?
Let's say in 7 of the apartments, there are 2 students living in each of the 7.
So if you have two students, if you have more than one student in a unit, it's considered a student rental. So to you would need to apply for a separate student rental
Okay.
for those units.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Just letting everyone know, I don't know why the chat made me do that, but the link to the full text of the new ordinance is in the chat, everyone. And the chat is now unlocked, so if you can't unmute yourself, you're more than welcome to type your question in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. All right. Alex, you're up. No, Alex.
While we wait for Alex, there's a question in the chat. When are we able to apply for the January 1st, 2025 renewal? Letters went out today, so you can start applying for your new application. And I want to make a note that unlike in the past, your renewal will be considered late after January 1st. So there's no like 3-month period of time you have to pay. It is due before January 1st.
Hey, Brandon, I'm
Alex.
unmuted now if you can hear me.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Alex.
Hey,
Thanks
I'm
for the-
sorry about that. So I was saying that it sounds like from the answers that are being given, which I think is a positive, that they're looking for an owner, a property manager, or a representative that can be contacted and be a point person. So it may be, property manager in Pennsylvania, if you don't own the property, has to be a licensed real estate broker. There might be owners that are outside those 10 miles that do self-manage their buildings that might just want to have a representative. If you guys would accept a tenant, it sounds like the majority of the questions are pointed at that. You may want to expand that definition, because there are some outside the radius owners that self-manage that maybe are not looking to hire a broker property manager.
Yeah. Good clarification, Alex. And I'll ask Ernest to elaborate, but the new application will have the ability for owners to name the individual tenant as the quote representative or property manager if that tenant agrees, right? So that tenant has to also sign off. So you could have the tenant serve as the property manager and meet that that part of the regulations. Ernest, anything to add to that?
No, well said.
All right.
We do have a couple questions in the
Yeah.
chat though. I could jump to real quick.
Yeah, so let's answer those few questions and then we'll get back to Donna and Helen.
Okay.
All right, so next one is can you elaborate on the reinspection fee?
The reinspection fee is primarily when there is a violation on a property and we have to make multiple trips out to assure that the property is now in compliance. You will be assessed a reinspection fee.
So thank you, Elizabeth. Laura asked, how can we apply for a unit to be a student rental? Now, I will add a clarification that the new rules and regulations do not change any of the zoning, right? So we did not touch any of the zoning provisions that regulate the use of a property, whether it's a rental or a student rental, right? And in order for you to have a rental that is not currently a student rental, right? Ernest, what do they have to do if you have a rental that is not currently a student rental so that it can be a student rental?
They would have to go through the zoning board, and get special exception.
Okay. And if they are a student rental currently, right, they don't need to do anything special, right? They just need to submit the student rental license before January 1st if they are currently a student rental.
Correct. And this year we are accepting you will be able to apply for your or renew your licenses online. So you'll be getting in your letter our website, Township portal, online portal, where you could put all your information in, apply and pay online.
Okay. We do have a couple more, but I do want to, Donna and Helen have been patient. So Donna, why don't you go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll go back to the chat. Donna?
Hi, sorry.
You're good.
I thought, oh, excuse me.
Okay.
I thought I had it unmuted, but I must have missed the button. So I just have a couple of questions. The first question has to do with the distance. Um, if you've had a property management company that manages your property for you and you've had them for multiple years, um, and they don't live within that 10 miles, can I keep my property manager? Do I have to look for somebody else?
Ernest?
I'm sorry, I was muted. We would consider that on an individual basis. If they're a management company, I think we may show a little leniency compared to just a caretaker. So it really just depends. You'll have to let us know where exactly they live or where exactly they run their business out of.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it
Yeah,
sounds like you have a conversation.
yeah, sounds
All right.
good. My other quick question, the reinspection fee is if you go out to have your first initial inspection done, is and it fails, is the first reinspection included in the fees, and that reinspection fee is if the second inspection fails?
Yes, the first reinspection, if you have things non-compliance in your unit and has to get fixed, is part of your rental fee. The reinspection fee is if we have to come out multiple times because we showed up and things weren't corrected as expected. Or like I said, if there was a violation on the property aside from your rental inspection, and we have to come back to assure that it complies.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Good questions, Donna. All right, let's take a question from Helen, and then we'll answer a couple more from the chat, and then we'll come back to Franklin. All right. All right, Helen,
Can you hear me okay?
we can hear you loud and clear.
So we have an interesting situation that just happened. It's not a rental, but I need to understand this. Somebody applies from a property at Scully, managed a really great property. They are not a student, but they're going to be a student. They're married, they're from another country. They have a student visa, but they're not a student. They're in their maybe late 40s, early 50s. They have some source of real income from abroad. They're here. They may go to school. They're here on a student visa, but they're not a student. In other words, they're not undergraduates. It's not like I can get a matriculation letter from them.
Yeah.
One, what are they charged since their their visa says they're a student, but I mean they're in their 40s and they're not going for a bachelor's or master's or something like that. They're not Villanova or St. Joe's. They've got like, a 10, 12-year-old child. What category do they fall under from the township's point of view? I don't even know what category to put them on, in the office. What do you think we should do?
So, Helen, is it a single individual?
No, it's a husband and wife. They're,
And, and
they're
are
in their
they both
40s.
are they both going to school or?
No, it's a weird thing. And they haven't even they're not even our tenant yet, but his visa was one where he can't work and he's not a student. There's like F1, F2 or something like that. And I just would want to make sure we categorize it right from the township.
Yeah.
So there is no school that I could even say they go to. And we can verify their landlord reference because it's a property locally managed by Scully, and I won't mention the property.
Yeah.
And we can verify their income. What do they get classified as?
Hey, Brandon, at that point, we would not consider them a student if they're not going to school. We don't look at their visas or anything like that. Also, a student house is more than one student. So
Okay.
even if he was going to school and it was just him, it wouldn't be student housing.
Okay. You've been so helpful. In this case, it's the woman who might be a student and her husband who will be taking care of the kid. But I mean, they haven't even leased from us. It just was unusual because I wouldn't know what category they would fit into.
Yeah,
But you've helped me.
would not be a student rental.
They would be a non-student, Helen.
Okay.
All
Hey,
right?
thank you so much for clarifying this for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Have a
what we're here
great day.
for.
I really appreciate it.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right. We will get back to you in a second, Franklin and Faye and Ted. Going to the chat, Jeff asked, will the properties that are in default be listed anywhere, or will they become public record? At this point, the township is not going to post lists of properties that are in default. We will keep, we will know internally, but we're not going to be posting that list or putting it on the website. Terry says that this group seems to be a good source of buyers and sellers for investment properties. Is there a way to share contact info? Instead of going to research, go through tax records. I'll leave that up to you all. If you want to connect with each other, this seems like a great group, great question so far. Brian asked, is the 10-mile radius calculated from the township boundaries? That is a yes. So, from the township boundary, 10 miles in any direction. That's the answer to that one. Michael asks, are inspections now every year or is it still every 2 years? Ernest?
Every other year.
A student is every year, non-student is every other year.
All right. So
Also want to note that for those of you getting a student rental license this year, because we are changing the time frame of the rentals so that they all match from January 1st to December 31st, your student rental for this year will be good through December 31st, 2025.
Okay, and are applications for license renewal available on the website? I think you said they're going to be available starting today to renew online, right?
Yes, sir.
There you go. And could you put the link to where they can do that online in the chat for the folks?
To the online portal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I could do that.
yeah. And we will send a link to the recording we'll send that out. That we can easily do that. Happy to do that. Let's see, Temple, to obtain a 2025 rental license for multifamily residential properties, do individual unit inspections need to be completed? I fear that due to the fact that licenses are considered late, if not renewed by January 1st, that our property will not meet the deadline. So they have 275 units. So I think Temple, the gist of her question is, do the inspections need to happen before the license is issued?
No, we do inspections throughout the year.
Yeah, so you do not necessarily have to have your inspections done in order to renew or apply to get your license.
Correct.
Right? Alex says, I think the current student licenses are good through May 2025. Are you saying that we still need to meet the January 1 application, and will the township provide credit for unused portion of the time period?
Prorated. That was answered.
What's
That was the one we just answered. We prorated the student rentals because we changed the due date to a calendar year basis. So they're not going to expire in May. You're going to have until December 31st of 2025.
Yep.
And then it will expire. So you're actually off this last renewal that you just did in the spring. You're basically getting a year and a half of a license.
There you go. We may follow up for those with student licenses just to get the affidavit portion of it. So your licenses, if you are set to expire in May 2025, that'll go through December 2025. Just a reminder to, we may contact you to update that student affidavit so we know who's in which units. All right. Let's do a couple more. Do you have a sample form to view of the new rental license form? Are those online, Ernest? The new forms?
The new forms,
the portal.
the new forms are not online yet. They will be, but they are on the portal when you go in to re-register your property as a rental.
There you go. So you'll be able to see what it looks like.
And you'll be getting it in the mail within a day or two.
Yeah, and they've also our mailing went out today, so you'll also be receiving it in the mail.
All right. Patrick, and then we'll go back to the people with the raised hands. Is a rental only classified as a student rental if the occupancy is more than one person? And the answer is yes, right, Ernest? So if you have a single student in a rental, that does not count as a student rental. You need to have 2 or more students in a unit for it to count as a student rental.
Correct.
All right. So with that, we'll go back to Franklin. Thank you for waiting.
There we go. So could you talk a little more about having the representative be the tenant if we choose to do that? What would that entail? Do we have, is there wording? Is there something we can look at so we can add it to our leasing material?
Ernest, do you want to take that one or do you want me to?
Could you repeat that question? I missed some of it.
So in terms of having a representative within 10 miles of the township, if we choose to have our tenant be that representative, is there wording that's available for us to cut and paste into documentation for the lease that will fulfill the township requirements? Can you talk a little more about what that requirement is and what that wording looks like?
So on the actual application, now there is a spot for to fill out if your tenant is going to be representing the unit as the caretaker. As far as your lease goes, yeah, we wouldn't get involved in the wording on the lease. But when you look at our application, I mean, if you want to take some wording off of that, that's on you.
Right, but I guess the question is it defined on the application what a caretaker is and what the responsibilities are?
The responsibilities are based. The reason this comes up is when we do our inspections, owners that live in other states and other countries, we need to coordinate the inspection. So most of the time, this just comes down to someone we can contact to be let into the home to do our inspection. After that, okay. Our report, whether there's violations or not, normally goes to the owner, and then it's on the owner to fix any violations. The caretaker, sure. If it is the tenant, should understand that it's not the tenant's responsibility to fix any issues with the home. If the heater goes, it's on the owner. Lawn care on the owner, unless otherwise stated in the lease. This is really just for us to have a point of contact, so that we can perform our inspections and in case of an emergency. So very little will fall on the tenant if they take over that role. They just need to have the understanding that we will, most likely be contacting them to get into the house to do our inspection.
Got it. And that's all on the application. The wording is on the application for what that is.
Yeah, it's really just, exactly. It's like a point of contact. It used to say list your agent, but people were getting confused and they were writing down like who sold them the home and then
real estate agents and
exactly. But we would call them. So this was more just to clarify. It's a point person in case of an emergency. If it is the property manager that you go with or someone who does indeed, they're your maintenance person, your handyman, then we do expect them to correct the violations. But in no way does this, put anything on the tenant that we expect them to fix issues.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
And we didn't want to mess with how you and the leases work. We do not want to touch, the relationship you all have with your tenants in terms of leases. So this is more, as Claire, our housing inspector, was saying, more of a point of contact. Should we need to get in contact with someone and have someone relatively in the area that we can rely on in a quick and expedient fashion.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate the
Thank you.
clarification.
Great questions. All right, Faye and Ted, you're up. Thank you for your patience.
Hi, I've got a few different questions for you, please.
Go ahead.
Got a couple empty units right now that probably will not be rented, maybe in January. So what do I do? Do I wait till I have a tenant, or I may decide to put them up for sale? What do I do as far as a license when there's
Now,
no anything in there?
if you're possibly going to rent them, you should get a rental license, because if you go without renting them, then you're going to lose your rental license and the ability to rent, especially if it's a student rental.
No, they're not student rentals. They're all adults that are in there. But right now I have two empty units,
How many units total?
so
How
I
many-
didn't know what to
How many
do.
units total do you have?
I have three. One has a tenant that's renewed a lease, but two of the others have had to move out.
She's advertising to be rented. She needs a rental.
Yeah, if you're advertising them to be rented, then you need a rental license.
All right, I am advertising them to be rented.
Yeah,
Now, if
so
I
you
end
would,
up selling them, do I just notify you that they've been sold?
Can I chime in here? Are these like three individual condos that you're renting out?
That's correct, but only
Okay.
one's rented right
Yeah,
now.
so if you're gonna be selling them, you'd have to get a resale, then you really could go without the rental license in January if you're gonna be selling them, but like if you're gonna rent them, you need a rental license.
Okay, now my other question is, if I end up having my grandchild move in, that would be a medical student, that won't be a student because there's only one person, correct?
correct.
All right, so I still have to keep basically, even on that unit, a rental, even if I'm renting to live there?
Any income is generated, then it's considered a rental.
Okay,
So we'd either need it in writing stating that you're not collecting any rent, therefore, it's not a rental, they live there for free. But if there's any exchange of, money, then, or, rent received, then it's a rental property, whether it's family or not.
all right, so then basically my understanding is I'd be safer just to apply again for the rental license, even if they're not occupied right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Great question. Thank you. All right, let's go back to the chat. We got technical question. We talked about that. Deborah commented about being opposed. We're not going to share anyone's information. If you all choose to share information, that's your call. We're not going to do that. Anthony asked if we can renew online. You can. Elizabeth, if 2 units and one is owner occupied, do you need 2 licenses? Right? So, Ernest, we have let's say a structure with 2 units, one is owner occupied. You would only need a rental license for the 1 unit that is not occupied by the owner, correct?
Correct.
All right, easy enough. Michael asks, are designated rep manager living on site only required for total units of property above 45 units? I think you said that 45 was the magic number to have a property manager live on site, right?
Correct.
All right. There's the link for renewing online. Mike Curran asks, do these new rules, especially the 10-mile, apply to the borough of Narberth or just Lower Merion Township? Michael, this is strictly for Lower Merion Township. We do not encompass Narberth Borough. So if any of you have a property that is in the borough of Narberth, these new regulations do not apply to you. They are a separate governmental entity.
Now, that being said, just for clarity, there are some parts of Lower Merion Township that have a Narberth address.
Yeah.
So if you're in the borough, no, but if you're like on Narberth Avon Road, which is like, says it's a Narberth address, but it's a Lower Merion Township property. Yes.
Christy asks if a PhD student who has an income considered a student. Well, if that PhD student is attending school full-time, right? And they live in a unit with other students who attend school full-time, right? Then they would be considered a student rental. But if you have an individual PhD student in a unit just by themselves or they're the only student in a unit, then they are a non-student, right? Student rentals are two or more students in a unit, right? And they need to be full-time students. Unless you're undergraduate, part-time still counts as a student. Temple asks, if the maintenance worker or property manager that is noted as the point of contact moves or leaves before the year is up, how do we update the point of contact throughout the year? Can it be updated at any time online via login? I don't think we could do that online, but if that happens and your point of contact moves, leaves, or something happens, just shoot an email or give a call to our building and planning department and just update that piece of information, right?
Yes.
Lisa, happy to discuss being point person. All right. Alex, if the concern is disruption to neighbors and residents, why is the disruptive behavior rule only for student rentals? The disruptive behavior, when we were in the developing these new set of rules and regulations, that really just came up regarding the student rentals in particular. There was not a desire of our elected body to have that be applicable to the non-students. So, in terms of, loud parties and what have you, that are, synonymous with student rentals sometimes, right? That's why that provision is strictly for the student rentals, right? And the other part of why that is only categorized for student rentals is because of the transient nature of a lot of the student rentals, right? By having a differentiation with the disruptive conduct provision, right? We're allowed to take prompt action because what the old code was doing, or what it wasn't doing, is that by the time any complaints came up with a student rental, right, and by the time we got in front of the district court, the tenant and that student rental had moved on. The semester ended, they went back home, what have you, and we wouldn't be able to follow up with them. So by having a provision that defines disruptive conduct and separating that from, let's say, a criminal proceeding, we're able to take prompt action right then and there within a short period of time and allow us to better enforce the rules and regulations of the rental licensing program. All right.
Now, Brandon, that being said, I just want to reiterate that all rental properties are still, I don't want to say eligible, are still considered for maintaining a disorderly property, whether they're residential or student, which means that if you have more than 2 citations at a property within 6 months, we can determine that you are maintaining a disorderly property and take action then too, even for residential.
Andrea asks, do we schedule or will the township send us a schedule for inspections? Ernest, do they need to call you or do you call them?
Normally, our inspectors reach out. They'll reach out to each landlord or caretaker individually. If for some reason, you have a certain time or you need to get an inspection done before someone moves in, they want it, you can always call and schedule it yourself with one of our housing officers.
Okay. Anyone else? That's all the questions in the chat. I see no other hands up.
All right, so before we get done, Brandon, we do have a few things we want to touch on for everyone's information. All right, so for everyone's information, the big changes obviously are the fees. So make sure you check the fee schedule before you send in any check. If you have any questions, feel free to call our housing officers or myself. Also, again, I want to reiterate that the rental fees are due January 1st. After January 1st, you will be considered late, and there is a late fee. I believe it's $100 late fee. So let's make sure we're on top of that. Was there something else, Steve, you wanted to go over? Oh, if you have multiple units on your application, so if you're applying online or if you're sending in a paper application, we will not accept it unless it's completely filled out. So if you send in an incomplete application, we're going to send it back and you will probably end up getting a late fee. Make sure you fill everything out and list your unit and unit numbers. For landlords who have multiple units, we are asking everyone right now to email us a list of your units and unit numbers because we have to redo the software system we use to include these individual units since each unit is now getting their own license. Anything else, guys?
No, with the numbering of the units, it's how you number your units, not just 1 through 45. If, you know,
Right. It's their
B,
mailing
whatever,
address, the
so.
unit address for mailing. Any questions on that?
How much is the new fee for single house tenants?
$150.
There you go. And Donna asks, will there need to be anything new for new tenants that are moving in?
Anytime you change tenants, you need to make us aware of it. We
Yep.
need to have their names listed as the tenants.
Okay.
That's just on student rentals.
Yeah. So for student rentals, when you have new tenants, again, because there's that residency affidavit, you need to update that whenever you have new students, right, coming in.
Just with the student rentals, I will be reaching out probably April or May, get like your new students information, and then we'll go on from there, and then you'll hear from me again for inspections in September once they move in.
Yep. And just a reminder, when in doubt, feel free to give us a call, right? If you have a question or you're just not sure, we're happy to have a conversation. Does the township, hold on, we got a couple, issue an actual paper or a PDF license upon renewal?
We can email them to you if you need it. But it normally gets sent email that you can print out.
All right. So normally sent email that you can print out. All right. Can someone please post the email address that we need to send multiple properties to?
Yeah, you're right. My email.
Right. What email do we send the property addresses and numbers
We're
to?
going to be putting it in the chat right now.
All right. They're putting all that info in the chat. You can call the Lower Merion Building and Planning Department. That is if you have any questions regarding the rental license. The license does need to be posted at the property, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. We're just offering it to give it to you digitally so you don't have to make your way to the township building and fight traffic. So once you get that via email, print it off and post it. All right. And again, this is being recorded, so we will put this on the township website, and you can revisit all the questions that we've answered here today and on loop if you'd like. And with that, that brings us to the hour mark. And unless there are any other questions, we thank you all for spending an hour with us to learning a little bit more about the new regulations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact the Lower Merion Building and Planning Department. All right, Ernest, anything else?
Not right this minute. Someone did ask about posting licenses. If you have 200 units, you don't need to post 200 licenses as long as they're available in your manager's office to be inspected. Just keep them on site at all times.
All right. Hopefully we just calm someone down on that one. Good clarification. Thank you, Rick. All right. With that, everyone have a great day. Enjoy your holiday. Have a happy Thanksgiving for those who celebrate. All right. Bye.